and get a double cheeseburger at Burger King for just 99 cents.
I'm not Herb.
I'm not Herb.
I'm not Herb.
And what if your name happens to be Herb? Just say,
I'm not the Herb you're looking for.
remember, our juicy double cheeseburger for just 99 cents, just for saying...
Excuse me while I kiss the sky.
Mama, don't let your baby...
Some radio stations never grow up. Most listeners do. Welcome to the real world.
WCCO. Daddy's got a new job. Maybe he and Mom forgot what childhood means.
I'll never meet Mickey Mouse. Maybe we'll go.
Hey, little girl, do you think that no one cares about your dreams?
Daddy's working.
That's what you think.
These are times you'll always treasure. Now your dreams come true. Sharing all the fun together.
It's Mickey.
Together at Disney.
It's been like a carnival ride for Minnesota football coaches. Grant got off. Steckel got on. Then Steckel off. Grant back on. Holtz out, Goody in. And now Grant is back off, and Burns is on. We'll have details on this latest turn of the wheel up next.
You are watching WCCO Television, Minneapolis, St. Paul. This is the 10 p.m. report.
Good evening, everyone. It's not time warp. It is a fact. Bud Grant has stepped down as coach of the Minnesota Vikings once again.
And Bud Grant says it's for pretty much the same reason he stepped down 2 years ago, to spend more time enjoying the outdoors and his life. Bud's resignation comes amid front office turmoil and after a season that ended with 2 more losses than wins. But Bud says neither played a role in his decision. He said it seemed like a good time to move aside.
And I think the club is, whether I had anything to do with it or not, is in a little better shape than it was a year ago. I think the future's good. It's still a couple of years away from being a Super Bowl team, at least that. So I think it's time that they, get a coach who's going to be here for an extended period of time.
Named to replace Bud Grant was offensive coordinator Jerry Burns, a candidate who was passed over the last time around in favor of Les Steckel. Bud says leaving the team in Burns' hands allowed him to retire with, quote, a good taste in his mouth.
But there are still a lot of questions about this changing of the guard at the big league, big business organization called the Vikings. And Mark Rosen, along with Bud Grant, has more on that decision to retire.
Well, Pat, it's now back to the fishing holes and duck blinds for Bud Grant. By now, we have learned to expect the unexpected from Bud, who has always sailed his own course. Despite the cold, conservative image, Bud is a thoroughly modern man. Free, as an English poet put it, free as the road, loose as the wind. When the breeze first blew Bud to Minnesota in 1946, he asserted his independence, refusing a football scholarship, setting the tone for his upcoming career.
I came to Minnesota so I wouldn't have to be beholden to anybody. I could go out for whatever I wanted to, and nobody could say, hey, we give you a scholarship, you got to be here for this or that or the other.
Beholden to no one. Words to live by when he was a Minneapolis Laker, where he forged the friendship with Max Winter, winning a few championships on the way. The odyssey continued into the NFL, where he became one of sports' first free agents, rejecting an Eagle contract. So long, Philadelphia. Hello, Canada, where no one told Bud how to coach the Winnipeg Blue Bombers to even more championship titles. Opportunity knocked once more, and Bud answered, entering the NFL as head coach with the Vikings, working for Max Winter again. Should we be surprised at Bud's re-retirement? After all, this is a man beholden to no one but himself. Well, Bud, we've heard you say you haven't wanted to be beholden to anyone. You have followed that through in your entire playing and coaching career. What went into the decision-making process?
Well, as was mentioned earlier, I don't think there's a whole lot different in why I've stepped down this time as it was 2 years ago. The circumstances were more unusual coming back than they are stepping down. And last year was a different situation to come back to. Now I think maybe the ship has righted a little bit. What I was asked to do basically done, and maybe it's time for somebody else to, like Jerry Burns as an example, to take this team to the ultimate objective.
Were you thinking about this at all in the course of the season?
I don't think you do. At least I don't. At least I've programmed myself. You can't think about things, while the season. That would be cheating. So it was something that in my contract it stated. I had a year-to-year contract. If I was going to coach, I had to make that decision within a week of the last game of of that season. I had the 3 or 4 days to think about it, talk to Mike Lynn on the 28th, I think it was. Said I'd like to step down. He, of course, tried to dissuade me, and finally the decision was finalized, and he went and talked to Jerry Burns, which made me feel good because now the staff remains in place. My conscience is sated. Well, how difficult a decision really was it for you? It's a difficult decision, but then I'm in a position that you make difficult decisions, and I had a little time to make it, but not a lot of time. And I felt that the timing and all was good, and I think that's important. I don't think I'd have left if we were 4-12, but I think I would have left if we were 12-4.
That's interesting. Any regrets about even coming back in the first place?
No, this was an enjoyable season, actually, with new players and a new staff. I think the staff is excellent, and it was, saw some people come up, and it was a good year. I enjoyed it as much as any years I ever have in football. It seems as if, Bud, people are always looking for some deep, hidden meaning behind your decisions. Do you find that to be the case sometimes? Well, I can, by the nature of the job, there certainly is some speculation involved, but I can assure you it had nothing to do with anything that's going on or anything that happened previous or anything to do with money or contracts or extensions or demands or anything of that kind at all. No. When you say anything that's going on, obviously there's a court case that's ongoing with Max Winter, who you've been very loyal to. You're saying that had nothing to do with your decision? Absolutely nothing. My working relationship with Max and Mike Lynn has been excellent, hasn't interfered with anything we did, this past season, and I don't think will interfere with anything that goes on from now on. Well, Jerry Burns, I mean, you've worked with him for many, many years. What kind of a coach can the Viking fans expect? I think they're going to find a different Jerry Burns than might be their conception. He's going to be on the sidelines now, and you'll see Jerry at his best. I mean, he is a very intelligent, very knowledgeable, very humorous, has his own way of doing things, well organized, well planned, and will have the undying loyalty of every player on that football team and every coach, and I'm sure before long, every fan. Now, what is your title exactly going to be now at the Vikings? It's hard to remember. I'm an executive consultant in charge of organizational development. Sounds like quite a job. You figure that one out. Bud, best luck to you again. Mark. Well, Jerry Burns, like Bud Grant, is 58 years old, but unlike Bud, Jerry will be a head coach in the NFL for the first time. Burns, who has been the Vikings offensive coordinator since 1968, said Mike Lynn contacted him last Saturday in Jamaica about becoming the Vikings head coach. His reaction to his new job?
I'm very excited about it. I guess you could say a dream come true. Anybody in coaching looks for that head coaching opportunity, and certainly to be a head coach at the National Football level it's a great honor, a great opportunity, and I just hope that we can get the job done. And the great fans here, and they've been very patient, and I think the team will respond well. I think we'll have a good club next year.
Ralph Fritz will have more on Jerry Burns, and we'll get reaction from the Viking players to today's news a bit later. Pat?
All right, thank you, Mark, and best of luck to Bud Grant. Fans are traditionally the ones who are fickle when it comes to hometown teams, but this time the fan reaction was just about the same as it was 2 years ago when Bud retired the first time. Surprise! Mark Watts has more on that.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ralph John Fritz. The Minnesota Vikings had called what they term a very important news conference this afternoon. It's scheduled to take...
Unsuspecting Minnesotans watched the announcement with shocked feelings and shades of deja vu. Hey, one said, haven't we heard this once before?
Again, huh? Well, he'll probably go back to it in a little while.
I can't believe it. Didn't he just come back? Yeah, I think by now he'd pretty much know what he wanted.
And I think Bud just wants out of the kitchen. He just wants to fish.
And that's kind of the way Coach Grant explained it. He bids farewell again without ever winning the NFL championship.
And it's too bad that he's leaving before he got a Super Bowl.
Some say it wasn't Bud's fault.
I think Tommy Kramer should step down.
Viking fans reacted positively about new coach Jerry Burns. Some said it will be a difficult task for anybody to fill Bud Grant's shoes, adding, one man who might be able to do it is Burns.
I think Jerry Burns should have had the job in the first place when Les Steckel was brought on. So I don't see it to be anything that'll be detrimental to the future of the team.
I don't know. I just hope they don't hire Les Steckel again. I mean, anybody but Les Steckel would be fine.
Whether they were surprised, saddened, or just didn't care,
so I don't really know about football, but
they said there's no taking away the good memories he's given us and what he's done for Minnesota, the Vikings, and the NFL. Mark Watts, WCCO Television News.
And so after Bud Grant retired, then came back, and now retired again, some folks want one question to be answered. Will Bud come back a third time?
I said never, but never say never.
Excuse me while I kiss the sky.
Mama, don't let your baby.
Some radio stations never grow up. Most listeners do. Welcome to the real world.
WCCO.
You're gonna love the way we bring you closer every day. You're gonna love our airline. Midway, our spirit will lift you. Midway, our spirit will lift you. Midway, our spirit will lift you.
Top growers depend on Counter for superior control of more major corn pests. And for maximum performance, put your insecticide where it works hardest, in furrow. It can't be blown away by wind during application, so you put all of your insecticide to work, in the soil, where it can't be deflected by crop residue or washed away by rain. For superior performance and value, put your money where your crop is, in furrow. Counter.
We have decided to scrub the launch attempt for today.
Another failure in the continuing peril of the Space Shuttle Columbia. Today's mission was stopped with 31 seconds left in the countdown because of computer problems. Now we say another failure for a pretty good reason.
Well, this is the third time in a row the Columbia scrubbed its mission right before takeoff. A fourth attempt is planned for tomorrow morning. If you live near the airport, you know already that the roar of jets can be deafening there. The problem was so acute last summer that Governor Rudy Perpich formed a task force to study the problem. This week, the task force will vote on its final recommendations and present its report to the governor. As Colleen Needles reports, the recommendations are receiving a mixed reaction at the airport.
The Airport Commission has been wrestling with the noise problem for 16 years. The governor's task force began its work just 10 weeks ago. This week, it's ready to present 17 solutions.
It's a difference in attitude. The attitude of this group of people is that something had to be done. I think the attitude of the Airport Commission over time is that, gee, it would be nice if something could be done.
Even if these recommendations are finalized and the governor approves them, the Airport Commission isn't legally bound to adopt any of them. But according to the airport director, most of the recommendations are good ones. There are just a few he couldn't go along with. One of them is modeled after a program being implemented in Boston. The airport would set a noise budget based on 1984 noise levels. Each airline would be required to cut back on the number of its flights to comply. Airport Director Jeff Hamill wants to see how it works in Boston before trying it here.
There's a good deal of controversy in Boston coming from many different groups, the airline industry, the Air Transport Association, the private sector. We are very anxious to see what results from that public hearing process. And I think we can learn from that so we don't make the same mistakes.
In terms of waiting, I just don't think we can afford to do that in the Twin Cities anymore.
Other recommendations by the task force include a ban on night flights except for the quietest jets. The group also recommends suing the Federal Aviation Administration to determine who has the right to regulate flights. The task force believes the local community should be able to decide how many planes use its airport. The Airport Commission says it would rather work toward a compromise with the FAA than challenge the agency that funds and regulates the airport. Whatever happens, the task force and residents near the airport hope the roar of jets is muffled by this spring when windows are opened. Colleen Needles, WCCO Television News, the Twin Cities.
Of course, a busy airport can cause problems for some neighborhoods in this area.
But on the flip side, a busy airport can mean some big business for airlines, namely Republic Airlines, which is reporting a record year for 1985. Part of what gave them a record year was their December business. Republic's traffic jumped 62% this December compared to last. And in 1985, the airline served almost 17.5 million passengers. That is up close to 2 million from 1984. Tonight, 1,400 striking Hormel meat packers are faced with the prospect of returning to work or having other people fill their jobs. Today, the Hormel Company issued a public letter urging members of the striking local P9 to return to work next week. The company saying that with or without union members, the Austin plant will reopen next Monday. Last week, local P9 rejected Hormel's latest contract offer in the 5-month-long walkout. Twice today, union meat packers formed moving barricades outside Hormel's headquarters, and police had to be called each time to restore order. Meanwhile, Governor Rudy Perpich talked about one of the state's other financial problems. He addressed an education convention today, saying that Minnesota's projected budget deficit will wipe out the state's $450 million reserve. Under current state law, when the reserve sinks to zero, income tax indexing is automatically suspended, a move which would cost taxpayers $75 million. But the governor promised not to let the indexing suspension go through. Indexing adjusts people's tax brackets to help them keep up with inflation.
Had he had the right numbers in the first place, it wouldn't have mattered whether the reserve was 250 or 450 or 500.
However, the governor thinks that the situation would be worse if left to others to deal with.
When someone asks me about the budget, I say, thank God that I'm governor. I mean, if the guys upstairs had been governor, this would have been a complete fiasco.
In either case, both Governor Rudy Perpich and Speaker Jennings say they will ask the legislature to repeal the part of the tax law which would stop tax indexing in 1986.
Could there still be POWs left alive in Vietnam? POWs that the United States does not want out? Some present and former military and intelligence officers say yes, and they have filed charges which say the U.S. is involved in a cover-up of American POWs in Vietnam. Affidavits filed today claim that American POWs have been seen alive recently and that they are there because the United States thinks their removal would be, quote, counter to foreign policy. U.S. officials are not commenting. U.S. officials are also not commenting or revealing what action they may order against Libya for its role in recent terroristic attacks in Europe. But the president met with his advisors to review the options today amid reports that our European allies do not endorse strong action. As Skip Losher reports from the Washington newsroom, there is also division within the Minnesota congressional delegation.
The Palestinian terrorist group, which attacked innocent civilians at the Rome and Vienna airports, is aided by Libya, according to the White House. Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi denies having a hand in the airport carnage and claims there are no terrorist training camps in Libya. Our State Department calls that a lie.
That claim on the part of Colonel Gaddafi is really incredible and patently false.
The streets of Tripoli are unusually quiet today, despite claims that Libya's armed forces are on full alert, awaiting a possible attack. The president's national security advisors go to the White House today to discuss possible actions against Libya. But the advice of two Minnesota congressmen differs.
If you said we identify the terrorists and their direct supporters, and we find that they are in Libya, I support military action to surgically neutralize them.
Unfortunately, if we take action right now, we have the very undesirable side effect of uniting the whole Arab world behind this guy that they don't really like. I'd like revenge as much as anybody, but it will not serve our long-term purposes, in my judgment, to strike right now.
The Soviets today denounce U.S. threats against Libya, but do not say what Moscow will do if the U.S. attacks Gaddafi. And both Weber and Sikorsky say the U.S. must be very careful to make sure that any action that is taken does not result in all-out war. Skip Loescher, CCO News, Washington.
In South Africa tonight, 20,000 more blacks are out of work after being fired by the owners of the world's second largest platinum mine. The company fired the blacks for holding what they say was an illegal strike. The company promised to let another 10,000 workers go if they don't return to the job. That mine is currently working at only 10% of capacity, raising concerns there might not be enough of the strategic metal to export to the United States.
A prison takeover in Fort Madison, Iowa that lasted less than 2 hours is over tonight. Inmates at the maximum security prison took 7 guards hostage early this morning. The siege ended after 5 armed assault teams stormed that facility. Prison officials used what they call an emergency control plan to take back the prison. Now, that plan uses force to gain back control instead of negotiating with the inmates. 2 guards and 3 inmates were injured during today's rioting. Developments to report tonight in 3 local court cases. 5 convicted drug smugglers will serve from 7 to 20 years in prison. Those terms handed out today by Judge Edward Devitt in St. Paul Federal Court. Leonard Cragness and 4 others were found guilty of smuggling $16 million worth of drugs throughout North America. And a judge in Minneapolis refuses to throw out sexual assault charges against Gopher basketball player Mitchell Lee. He's accused of forcing another student to have sex with him last year. Jury selection began today. Lee will not play or practice during his trial. And the man accused of kidnapping his former in-laws will act as his own lawyer in St. Paul Federal Court. John David Lander is accused of kidnapping Richard and Verna Petty last year. Lander will get legal help from a public defender.
And we're on our way to a record tonight, record cold.
Well, January is trying to live up to its reputation as being the toughest month. Temperatures near by morning near 20 below. I'll tell you all about it in a minute.
Schmitzen at that meeting, snow or no snow?
Noonan, I want Schmitzen at that meeting, snow or no snow?
Boulder, I want Schmitzen at that meeting, snow or no snow?
Edelmeyer. You know who to call when you have to get a package there. But what do you do when you have to get a person there? No matter how crazy the weather, you drive a Subaru, or you may get stuck with something else.
Goodbye, y'all.
See y'all later. Try to have a nice time without me.
Without you is the only way.
Monday night following the 10 p.m. report.
Tom, it was me.
There's fun.
I'm gonna go for it.
Fun and fantasy.
Yeah, I'm gonna win too. I've seen this. I've played.
When exciting people bid.
You may be right.
For big prizes.
I am looking for a winner.
Weekdays on The Price is Right. Weekdays. After Jeopardy.
If you're gonna go for it, go for it.
On Channel 4.
You freeze water and you wind up with ice. Most of us use those to build tall, cool drinks. But that is simply not good enough for the king of St. Paul's Winter Carnival. He has different construction plans in mind, and they're pretty regal ones. After knighting a group of construction workers, King Boreas oversaw the final beginning of his ice kingdom this afternoon. The first of 40,000 ice blocks was placed today. The event on the shores of Lake Phelan was accorded all the pomp and ceremony usually reserved for visiting heads of state, but then Boreas is, after all, a king.
And those blocks will not melt anytime soon. And boy, what a homecoming you gave me. 20 below zero and my first night out.
Did anybody say that to you yet?
Yes, they did. Thank you
It
very
is
much.
going to be cold, and you're right. You're getting initiated. Coming back, first night out, 20 below zero. Oh, who needs it? Well, anyway, we started out without a great deal of warmth around here this morning, with temperatures overnight this morning dropping 20 below zero up to the north of us, a little tongue of 30s coming down into the northern part of the state. There wasn't a great deal of warmth anyplace. Temperatures in the teens all the way down into Georgia, Mississippi, and Alabama. It was cold every place overnight last night. And how are we doing? Well, our current readings right now around the 5-state area, we're still holding at 8 degrees below zero. But look, that's St. Cloud at 20 below. Up at Grand Forks, 27 below. International Falls, 27 below. That cold air is still moving down in our direction, and it looks like we will, by morning, possibly have the coldest night so far this season, and certainly so far this year, starting from January the 1st. We're forecasting 30s below up in the northern part of the state. International Falls will undoubtedly be somewhere around 35 below, with 20s below all the way down into the Twin Cities, teens below zero all the way down into Iowa. Nice frosty night and early morning. By tomorrow, well, our high temperatures today, we did warm up into the single digits below zero. We were 3 below for our high temperature. You can see freezing temperatures all the way down into the nation's midsection. A little bit of warmth hanging on to Florida, Texas, and Southern California. Parts of Southern California today in the 80s, so there was quite a temperature contrast across the old country today. Take a look at what we're expecting. There is some warmth out here, and the jet stream is still drawing this cold air out of Canada, out of the North Pole area, and scooting it down over us, but this milder air is trying to make it into us, and it looks like by the end of the week we will see a warm-up. So we're just getting a 1 or 2 night shot of this, and then we'll warm up a little bit. So things are at least looking positive. Quite a bit of rain down along the Gulf Coast. That's going to intensify over the next couple of days and spread into the southeastern part of the U.S. A little bit of snow back in the Rockies, and at least in New Mexico and Colorado, but for much of the nation, precipitation free right now, and our skies are certainly just clear outside. Our weather guide, 3 below was the high, 10 below was the low. You can see how those compare to the average, and they're a long ways from the records too, but anyway, it was a long ways from the average too. Now, our current conditions here in the Twin Cities, we are down to 8 degrees below zero. It's clear with 58% humidity. Northwest winds at 9, still giving us a wind chill of 30 degrees below zero. Those winds will continue to drop off overnight, so the wind chills probably won't be a factor over the next couple of hours or so, and the barometer is still rising, 3056. Well, for tomorrow, high pressure center generally to the east of us. There is a warm front out to the west. As that warm front approaches, we should see some increase in cloud activity, at least late in the night. It looks like most of the activity from this storm is going to be far enough to the north that all we'll see is an increase in clouds, maybe late tomorrow night, a flurry or two, and that might linger on into early Wednesday morning. But the high temperatures, tomorrow will be the coldest day probably out of the next 5, with temperatures only climbing up to around zero here over the southern part of the state, 30s all the way down into northern Texas. And then we'll begin the warm-up. Temperatures at least in the 30s out to the west, moving in our direction. Now our forecast for tonight, clear and very cold, 20 below zero. That, if we get to that, it'll make it the coldest night so far this season. Winds will become light and variable. Tomorrow will be mostly sunny, a high of zero, barely. We might make it up to zero. Southeast winds at 5 to 10 miles an hour. Tomorrow night, then, we'll have mostly cloudy skies as that warm front approaches, a chance of some flurries, 10 below early in the evening, and then steady temperatures to slowly rising, getting up to around 20 degrees on Wednesday with partly sunny skies, and it will be warmer. Now, the extended forecast calls for little or no precipitation then on through the rest of the week. Warmest day will probably be Thursday, and then cooling off a little bit Friday and Saturday, but only into the teens, so that'll be tremendous warm-up over what we're expecting tonight and tomorrow.
Will be warmer because it can't get colder.
That's true.
Now, Mike, this is the kind of weather where you should really take precautions, though, right? 20 below. I mean.
20 below, you bet, especially if we had any wind. Thank heavens we don't. But if you don't have adequate antifreeze in your car, you're going to be in trouble. If you don't have a good battery, you're not going to start in the morning.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Mike. Well, just when you thought it might be time to take down the holiday decorations, we have to wish you Merry Christmas again, or at least some of you tonight. Tonight is Christmas Eve for Orthodox Christians around the world. President Reagan extended a special greeting of peace to Russian and Orthodox celebrants in the Soviet Union. A little closer to home, though, Northeast Minneapolis residents gathered for traditional Mass at St. Michael's Ukrainian Orthodox Church. Well, I'm not the only parent making a comeback tonight. Mark Rosen, a new dad, is here.
It's called in special for this.
One night stand, as they say. How did the play? We heard from Bud Grant a little bit earlier, of course. How do the players feel about the changing of the guard? We'll find out. We'll also hear from Jerry Burns. That's up next.
Years ago at mealtime, there was always fresh homemade bread. Now, Country Hearth breads bring back the taste of the past. Made with hearty wheat and grains, buttermilk, and honey, Country Hearth breads are naturally wholesome. This week, 7 whole grain bread is on special at your favorite store. Delicious at breakfast or at any meal, Country Hearth 7 whole grain bread. Enjoy nature's gift of goodness. Bring home the family of Country Hearth breads. Country Hearth breads, they're naturally good.
The Northwest Orient Boeing 757, one of the new generation of quieter aircraft. Quieter on takeoff, quieter on landing, quieter overhead. That's why Northwest Orient bought 30 Boeing 757s, because we think peace and quiet is a worthwhile investment. Don't you?
All right, we've heard from fans, we've heard from Bud. Who else can we talk to?
Just about everyone associated with the Minnesota Vikings.
The whole world.
Well, I think a lot of people were real surprised about it, Mike. Most everyone directly involved with the Vikings was surprised by the changing of the guard. After the initial shock, reaction was varied.
If you would look at the things, he's been in professional sports now for 36 years, becomes at a time, and Bud really knows how to enjoy life. I don't think there's been another coach in the National Football League that had the balance with his family, recreation, and his professional job. So it was not really a total surprise to me, the decision that Bud made.
First thing I think about is how hard it is to win when you keep changing coaches the way we have. And, you know, so that's a concern of mine also.
I'm just grateful that I had the chance of playing up under someone as great as Bud Grant. You know, when you're little, you always see him on TV and things, and then when you grow up and you play with one of the legends of national football, it's a reward in itself.
Jerry is a unique individual. He is someone who will show a lot of emotion. He will be someone that will have an altogether different public image than what Bud had. He'll be someone that I think that you will be able to take a look at Burns immediately, and you will be able to see his highs and his lows.
Never know how somebody's going to react once they do become a head coach. I'm sure if he keeps, you know, the same personality that he has now, I think he's well liked among all the guys. As far as him being a fiery kind of a coach, he's going to be a complete opposite as far as Bud was in that area.
Jerry Burns will now have the task of replacing himself. As the Vikings offensive coordinator, Burns has spent every football Sunday in the coach's press box, relaying plays to Bud Grant on headsets. Now, as Ralph Fritz reports, Burns will find out what it's like on the sidelines.
Till now, Viking players, friends, fans have called him Burnsy.
And I would recommend that the one thing that we would ask is that you now address Jerry Burns as Coach Burns and not Burnsy.
The 1984 season was perhaps the most bitter football pill Burnsy ever had to swallow. Les Steckel, never before a head coach anywhere, had been named head coach of the Vikings. Burnsy had been slapped in the face, embarrassed by the team he had been loyal to for 16 years. By season's end, Burnsy had had it up to here.
I was obviously disappointed when I wasn't considered for the job. Obviously, I was disappointed in the way it was handled, and so I've really been in a transitionary period as far as my mental approach to the game is concerned.
But the demise of Les Steckel and the return of Bud Grant rekindled the old relationship, and Burnsy had new life.
I pretty much gave up my aspirations towards being a head coach, and this comes as a great surprise to me.
Is it difficult for you to understand why you didn't get the job 2 years ago at the time?
Oh, I've thought about it a lot. It's water over the dam. It doesn't make any difference to me. I'm just, a lot of guys never get the opportunity I get.
It's a case of good things coming to those who wait. And who's waited longer than the man called Burnsy? Ralph John Fritz, WCCO Television Sports, Eden Prairie.
The Los Angeles Rams will be heading to Chicago a little earlier to get used to the Windy City weather. Rams coach John Robinson said it takes about 2 or 3 days to become acclimated to the cold, so his team will practice in Chicago on Friday and Saturday. Meanwhile, the Bears are going the other way. They'll be working out in Atlanta all week, as they did a week ago. Well, tonight at the Boston Garden, a hockey exhibition between the Bruins and the Moscow Dynamo squad was marred by a bomb threat. A device was removed from the first floor an hour before game time. The Soviet captain didn't appear too thrilled to be in Boston. The Dynamo, which is composed of Soviet policemen, got the last laugh. They beat the Boston Bruins 6-4 to even their record at 1-1 on their North American tour. Meanwhile, the St. Louis Blues blew the chance to tie Chicago for first in the Norris Division. Montreal routed them 9-2. Bobby Smith scored his 16th goal of the season for the Canadians. Nice play by Bobby. I want a correction on an earlier story, Mike. We said that Bud Grant had never won an NFL championship. Of course, he did in 1969 when the Vikings defeated the Cleveland Browns to win the NFL title. They, of course, lost in the Super Bowl.
Right.
Of course, Pat, you know, this is, I said, only one thing would get me back from my paternity leave here tonight, and that was Bud Grant's retirement, re-retirement. Young Nicholas, 9-day-old Nicholas John Rosen is at home. There he is. That's his normal pose, of course. As you well know, Pat, babies are wide awake 24 hours a day. to laugh and cheer and have a good
No,
old time.
not
I'm sure
my baby.
Kate has
My
been the same
baby
way
is
for you.
always sleeping. Oh, wait a minute.
Oh, wait. What's this?
She looks a lot like her mother, don't you think?
I'll tell you what, Pat, after observing the birthing experience for the first time, if men had babies, the population would be very, very small.
I don't know what to say to that, Mark.
Okay, and finally, when you think of all these Minnesota coaching changes, you're probably getting a bit mixed up. But lest we not forget what we are going through here at CCO. Now, just moments after the announcement was made today, our crew had to go back to work yet one more time on the set where we have our Viking shows. And yet one more time, oh, the crew had the grueling job of scrubbing off Bud Grant's name. It's getting so we need full-time help just to keep that set up to date.
Just say it. Boy, I sure wish these guys had figured this out one of these days.
It's a tough job, but that man can do it.
Somebody's got to do it. Well, speaking of tough jobs, Mike Fairborn has the tough job of bringing you the forecast for tomorrow. It should be about 0, so we hope you'll bundle up and have a good evening. Good night, everyone.
The 10 p.m. Report with Pat Miles and Don Shelby. Mike Fairborn's weather and Mark Rosen Sports has been a presentation of WCCO Television, serving the people of the Twin Cities.